After slowing down Georgia's offense, can Missouri's defense do the same against Anthony Richardson and the Florida Gators? Well, who better to ask than Brandon Olson of Locked On Gators? So this crossover edition of Locked On Mizzou and Locked On Gators coming at you right now.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. Your team every day. Thanks for sending your friends to LockedOnMizzou.com for all your pertinent links. Whether you're into video or audio, we've got you covered all at LockedOnMizzou.com. And today's episode is brought to you by Upside. Download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. And you know what? I think I set it up well enough in the top of this show, in the tease. So you know what? Without further ado, let's just get to my discussion with Brandon Olson of Locked On Gators. Another edition of Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On College Network. So I hope you all enjoy.
We are here with Locked On Crossover Action. I am Brandon Olson, the host of Locked On Gators, with John Miller, the host of Locked On Mizzou, and we're talking about this Florida Gators versus Missouri Tigers game. Before that, today's episode is brought to you by Upside. Download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. And John, before we even talk about the game, I want to give you personally, on behalf of the Missouri program, a big thank you, because last year's loss to Missouri in overtime was the moment where I was like, okay, Dan Mullen's getting fired.
It's all over.
Yes, I that loss was legitimately the moment I was just like, okay, like there will be a change. Beforehand, we were like, maybe there needs to be a change, but the loss to Missouri just solidified it for me, where I was just like, okay, Dan Mullen's gone. Let's start looking at candidates. So thank you so much for that, because we got Billy out of it. So I'm cool with it.
Well, so good. I'm glad you guys. So we're still in the honeymoon phase with Billy Napier, I see. What are the early impressions of Coach Napier?
I love that he's been willing to adjust, because, you know, the first few months recruiting wasn't hot and Florida fans started getting very upset with it, where Billy had to put out an open letter where he was like, hey, like, we're going to get it done. And then he got more aggressive and got a ton of commits in a short period of time. And then the first few weeks of the season, Florida's offense was looking so boring and simple. And then the past 2 weeks, he's opened up the playbook and he's like, hey, we figured out how to throw the ball downfield. So I like that he's just like willing to adjust to things that aren't going the way they should be going. And that's just, it's one of those things where, like, the Broncos with Nathaniel Hackett, I'm like, okay, it's rough and it doesn't look like it's getting any better. Like, he's not making changes. Billy Napier's at least changing what needs to be changed. So it's very refreshing. And I love that. And I love him. He just seems like a really cool guy. But from your end, what is the biggest story for Mizzou football heading into this game?
Well, obviously, as everybody in the country noticed this past Saturday, a really, really, really good ball game between Missouri and Georgia, which I don't think anybody was really expecting. Certainly, I wasn't expecting that close of a ball game, despite what a gigantic homer that I am. So I guess the question is, can Missouri keep this momentum going? It's going to be tough. Typically, it's hard for a college team to have that kind of atmosphere on a Saturday night, get up really big for number one, get that close, and then, hey, we got to play another game. 11 a.m. kickoff, am I wrong on that? Or noon, I guess, Eastern time. So an early kickoff, boy, that's worrisome to me. But really the biggest story, I think, for Missouri this week, we might find out today. In fact, this is Wednesday as we record here. Wednesday's practice for Missouri could be big because Dominic Lovett who just got put on the Biletnikoff watch list, by the way, leads the conference in receiving yards, got banged up, didn't play in the second half last week, but still managed to get 84 yards in the first half, something like that. So if he doesn't play, that's a really big deal for Missouri. But if he can play and is anywhere close to 100%, I think Missouri actually has a pretty good shot in this ball game.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Lovett was the receiver where there was that little scramble drill with Brady Cook, and then he just completely separated. It looked like he was running a hook or a slant and just completely went with the corner after that. And it was a great play. So if he doesn't play, that helps Florida a lot in terms of scramble drill and that big playability there. And I mean, for Florida, we clearly it's Anthony Richardson. Whether you want it to be or not want the big story to be Anthony Richardson,
Sure.
it's always going to be Anthony Richardson. Whether he can continue his hot streak that he's been on with Tennessee and Eastern Washington, which I know vaunted defenses over
Sure.
there.
Yeah.
Whether he's going to continue that hot streak or we're going to see, Kentucky or South Florida Anthony Richardson, where he just cannot get his feet underneath him. I think that's my biggest concern because and I've said this a million times, one of the most physically gifted human beings on the planet. People that are his size don't move the way he does.
Right.
And if they do, they're not playing quarterback because they can't throw the ball at all. And so he's one of those kinds of players where it's incredibly difficult to game plan for. But I mean, South Florida and Kentucky just let him throw the ball and he made his own mistakes. So that's got to be the biggest storyline for me with the Florida Gators. Just going into this one. And John, I actually do want to ask you for a second about Coach Drinkwitz and just how he's been doing this year. Because I'll tell you this, I don't like him. I don't like Coach. So I will ask how he's been doing this year. I know he was. It was a blowout week 1 versus Louisiana Tech, and he was just like, "Yeah, no, we need to be better." And he's like, "We need to be better." So,
right.
Just how's he been this year? How's his performance?
Well, I think it's been up and down. And, I sort of joked around early about Billy Napier still being in the honeymoon phase. Well, I think Drinkwitz is officially out of the honeymoon phase. And now in year 3 here, I think Missouri fans are taking a much more critical look at the guy, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of Missouri fans, and including myself at times, have been critical of his play calling. And really, even more importantly, just so far his inability to find a signal caller, a quarterback that he seems to be really comfortable with, one that can actually run his offense. In fact, Brady Cook, who he's starting in year 3, is a Barry Odom recruit. So that kind of tells you about all you need to know. Now, I am curious, Brandon, what's your beef with Drinkwitz? Obviously, there was the Dan Mullen kerfuffle, the whole, I'm going to put on the Darth Vader helmet and all this kind of crap thing. Is that basically it? We're just tired of Drinkwitz's mouth before he's really accomplished anything? Is that the whole deal?
Partially, it's also that I met him before, and I
Okay,
didn't like the interaction. I met him at
Interesting.
the 2021 Senior Bowl. He was there because Larry Roundtree III, who I love, was there. So I got to meet Coach Drinkwitz and Coach Looper, I believe his last
Yeah.
name is.
Yep,
Coach,
Chance Looper, or yes, Curtis Looper, excuse me. His son is
awesome.
Chance, yeah.
He was awesome. He was incredibly nice.
Cool.
Coach Drinkwitz legitimately, like, I went to introduce myself, and he was just like, legitimately just waved me off, and I was like, I hate him.
Then.
You know
what? That's fair. I will say one thing I've noticed with Coach Drinkwitz. This was definitely true in his first year with Missouri. If you're a younger member of the media, like if you're younger than Coach Drinkwitz and you're in the media, he kind of likes to bully the young guys in the media a little bit. So that seems a little bit on brand for me. I hate to say it.
Yeah, it hurt my feelings a little bit.
I don't blame you. I would have probably taken that a little personally too.
Yeah, I was just like, okay, man.
Come on,
I was
bro.
coming here to give you a compliment, and he just completely just
gave you the old stiff arm, huh?
Yeah, so I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to Coach Looper, and he's way nicer. But we're about to take a look at how Florida can win this game, how Missouri can win this game. But first, a quick word from Upside, because, John, I don't know about you, but driving's been a bit of a pain lately with the prices of the gas pump. They've gotten better, but it's still bad, and I like to eat out a lot. So them checks for me, not not wonderful. Inflation is hitting me right where it hurts, right in the bank account, which is why I started using Upside. Upside is an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, dines out, and with every purchase, I'm earning cash back thanks to Upside. To get started, download the free Upside app. Use my promo code LOCKED and get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code LOCKED. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators or Locked On Missouri your first listen of the day. And now we're talking about this big game. It's noon Eastern, 11 Central Time kick here, and Florida versus Missouri. Missouri is winning the series lead. I believe it is 6-5, especially after last year's 23-24 overtime win, which was a heartbreaker for me. It was just I had friends at my house when that happened, and let me tell you, one, I never have people over because I am an intense football watcher, not a yeller. I'm very quiet, but it sets a mood where I'm just like, don't talk to me.
Right.
And the way that game ended, I legitimately just walked out of the living room, went into the office, and I was just like, I need a breather. But
I think that's how I felt after the Auburn game a couple weeks ago. I was like, I'm going to need a minute before I do this post-game video, guys. Give me a second here.
yeah, I remember I had a bunch of friends over, and I was just like, no, you need to leave me alone right now. That should not have been a loss in the way that it was. I believe there was one passing touchdown, and our quarterback caught it. So that's about how that game went. It was really fun. But John, going into this game this Saturday, what does Missouri have to do to win this game?
Well, number one, I think on the defensive side of the ball, I think that's the strength for Missouri right now is that defensive group. And it seems like the plan by several of the Gators opponents so far, at least for the most part, has been to load the box against Anthony Richardson a little bit and dare him to make throws. And if you paid attention to my podcast or you just watched the Missouri game this past week against Georgia, it sounds quite a bit like Missouri's game plan against the Dogs this past Saturday, which was mostly effective, obviously. So I'm just curious, how do you see that matchup playing out? Because do you think Anthony Richardson can handle that type of pressure, get the ball out of his hand quickly, and make those kind of quick decisions?
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me going into this game when I was just looking at it was that Missouri has, I mean, against Georgia at least, felt like they played a lot of man coverage and that they were sending
100%. Yeah.
yeah, they were sending quite a bit of pressure too. And so I was just like, okay, uh Martez Manuel, I believe is how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
He comes in, he blitzes on I think 15% of his pass defense snaps this season so far. Tyron Hopper has been not only used somewhat often as a blitzer. I believe he's about a quarter of his pass defense reps he blitzes, but he's been incredibly effective when he does it.
Yep.
And I know that game, I know that the Florida Gators locker room is not super keyed in on Tyron Hopper. Like there's no bad blood there. They know that, it was maybe a family situation as well. But
Okay.
I'm curious to see if Anthony Richardson can hold up against that because Tennessee blitzed the heck out of him and he did produce. He didn't play fantastic football. He was very productive, but it wasn't necessarily clean football throughout. I'm curious to see if you see maybe Justin Shorter running vertical often, and it's just can Anthony Richardson put the ball in a spot where Justin Shorter can win that contested catch? But even then, I think the fact that we have to go, well, you have to win contested catches says pretty much what it should say about the wide receiver room in Gainesville right now is that there's not a ton of talent. Anthony Richardson is going to have to pick it up. And I would expect to see Tyron Hopper spying Anthony Richardson quite a bit. That's how Kentucky kind of neutralized him a little bit. They had a spy, and it was just the second he left the pocket, Kentucky ran out on him. And I would think that Tyron Hopper would do the same exact thing. And I would expect the same thing from Missouri to kind of just I feel like Kentucky kind of set the game plan. They showed you exactly how you can neutralize Anthony Richardson, whether or not he was banged up in that game, whether or not the offense has changed. He still has to show you that he can do that because he's played 5 games this year. 2 have been good, 2 have been bad. One's been hit or miss with that Utah game. It was, the Heisman moments that people want to talk about, but he was wildly inconsistent in that game as well. So I think that's my biggest thing is just Missouri's going to be aggressive, and I'm a bit worried about Anthony Richardson actually being able to kind of beat that defense there.
Yeah, and I will say just on the matchup between the receivers there for the Gators, which you're not a huge fan of, I think Missouri's secondary has been really solid. Although Chris Abrams-Drain, maybe their best corner, missed some time last week in the second half as well. I just think that whole game plan, especially against Georgia last week, showed that Missouri does have a lot of trust in that secondary too. So I think like you said, I think we're going to see another aggressive defensive game plan here from Missouri against Anthony Richardson. Wouldn't certainly a quarterback spy on a lot of snaps makes a lot of sense. And really, I think if there has been the occasional weakness with this Missouri defense, occasionally their tackling has been a little bit suspect. It's been okay. I just think there's been moments where they've missed some tackles and, at just the size of Anthony Richardson. I mean, obviously there's going to be moments where guys like Tyron Hopper, possibly, Martez Manuel, like he brought up before, are going to have a chance to bring him down one-on-one. If they can't do it, if Richardson just uses his size to get out of it, that could be potential for some huge game-changing kind of explosive plays. That's something to watch to me with all the blitzing and pressure I think the Missouri's going to at least try to put on Richardson.
Yeah, and I mean, you can look at the Eastern Washington game, which again, Eastern Washington, but he had a defensive end literally just wrapped around his ankle, and Anthony Richardson could not move his legs and just still let it fly. Like it was just completely just pure arm talent, and he got a first down from it, and it was a big gain. So I think that's one of the things where you have to not only hit him, but you got to hit him pretty hard in order to bring him down. And I mean, looking at the Gators game plan, if you want to win this game, I think that we're looking at the defense as well. So both teams was like, a defense has to show up. Where I think with the Gators, you've got Brady Cook's got dual threat ability. He's not Anthony Richardson running the ball, but he can certainly make you pay. I think he's picked up like 15 first downs running the ball this season. Just he's been a killer when you disrespect him there. And I think the rushing attack from Missouri is going to be something that every team has found success running the football against Florida. Florida fans love to tout that they've got almost 200 rushing yards per game when I believe they're allowing 215 rushing yards per game.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, do you really care about your rushing offense there if rushing defense has been bad and Florida has just been so passive? If you're listening to my show daily, you know that I complain about it. I complain about how passive this Florida Gators, specifically defensive line has been. And then if you're a Locked On Mizzou listener, congrats. Now you know Florida Gators defensive line cannot stop the run with any sort of consistency. So I think that's the thing for me where Brady Cook is going to have scramble opportunities. We all saw the Hendon Hooker, I think it was like 45 or 50 something yard rush against Florida. And then you have this Gators rushing defense, which has literally just let people run through them at will. And they kind of just take the punch in the mouth. They don't really do anything. And it's not what we're used to seeing from a Florida Gators defense. And that kind of worries me against this Missouri offense that is going to run the ball.
Yeah, that's interesting. If anything, I would have liked to have seen, especially last week, Brady Cook run the ball a little bit more, just maybe some more designed stuff, maybe some just simple read option keepers on the back end of the defense, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, Missouri's passing game at times has definitely left a lot to be desired. They hit some explosive plays against Georgia last week, but there wasn't a lot of efficiency there. Not a lot of just, consistent moving of the chains kind of stuff. So if indeed Missouri can run the ball effectively, yeah, that'll be a huge deal for sure.
Yeah, schematically, Florida looks similar, we'll say, to Georgia. Not the exact same. There are some differences, but similar to Georgia. And Missouri found big plays against there, and I can tell you Georgia's got better players on that defense than Florida has. So it's a matter of actually being able to execute your game plan, which Florida has been so bad at this year. Just so, but might as well have me out there at certain points with the way things are looking. And if you're listening and not watching, not an athlete. Just know that, not an athlete. So it wouldn't be best for Florida to have me out there. But at certain points, it's been incredibly rough. And John, to wrap up today's show, we are going to talk about these score predictions and how we think it'll work out. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. To wrap up today's show, it's Locked On Crossover Action. Brandon Olson from Locked On Gators, John Miller from Locked On Mizzou here. And John, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first? How do you want to do this?
You
I'll
know
be
what? Since I'm the guest, I suppose I will go first. I'll take the lead here and take the tee box. I'm really seeing once again. I sound like a broken record here if you listen to Locked On Mizzou, because every single week it seems like I'm telling my listeners to take the under of every Missouri game, and this total here, especially after listening to you, Brandon. 55.5, that just seems too high to me. I just think one of these offenses at least is probably going to fail to live up to its half of that total. I just don't see it. So, first of all, I just think it's going to be a close ball game. I really do. I just have a feeling maybe if Dominic Lovett is out, maybe I'll change my tune. I have a feeling he's going to get out there. Drinkwitz said he was like 50-50 yesterday. I think he's going to gut it out and play. Maybe that'll look wrong here by the time this show comes out. That's just my feeling right now. I think Missouri actually somehow pulls out a victory here, something like 23-20, something like that.
I like that I didn't know that the over-under was set at 55.5. I did know that Florida's the spread right now. Florida's 10.5 point favorites.
Which just strikes me as really high. I think these teams are
wrong.
pretty close. I really do. I just think these teams are pretty close.
Yeah, it's definitely wrong. I don't know what they're doing over there. Love them, but
love you guys at betonline.net,
yes,
but that number is way too high.
I have given them my money already that Florida will cover that, because I was like, I want to get there before that changes. I didn't know the over-under was set at 55.5. I did have the score as Florida 31, Missouri 24.
Okay.
I think Florida wins. I think that it's closer than 10.5, but I think Florida can win this game by a touchdown. I think that I don't want to be kind of dismissive of Missouri, because I was very dismissive of Kentucky. And then, as you like to say, that Missouri will eventually punch you in the groin or kick you in the groin.
That's right.
Yes, I talked a lot of trash to Kentucky, and then Florida and Kentucky kicked me in the groin for 60 minutes, and just that whole game. I do think that Florida, at least if they keep that offensive playbook opened up, will be able to create some big plays, especially if you have an aggressive defense. Florida has no problem keeping in tight ends and running backs to pass protect and just trying to let you win a jump ball. And also, I think more going into my feel for this is just, you mentioned it earlier, where it's hard to play number one and get really revved up for that game and then come out the next week and show up. It is very difficult to do that. And I liken it to how Florida last year against Alabama. Florida played way above their weight class. And then, I mean, Tennessee the next week was just Tennessee imploding. But after that Alabama game, they never had the same juice, because they got really revved up to play a top 3 team, and they played above their weight class, and it wasn't good enough to get the win. And I feel like Missouri might hit that same little hangover.
That definitely worries me a lot. I brought it up before, but I think, I wasn't actually planning on picking Missouri to win until just right in that moment after talking to you. I just had a feeling, gosh, maybe the Tigers will win this. And a part of it is, despite the fact that this is a tough spot for Missouri after an emotional game against a really good physical opponent, a part of me just thinks that maybe Missouri wants this a little bit more than Florida. This is a rebuilding season truly for Florida, I think, more so than Missouri. Again, this is year 3 of Drinkwitz, year 1 of Napier, still just a lot of Dan Mullen defenders out there and that kind of thing. I have to wonder about the locker room a little bit after, let's face it, Florida's a team that's won, I believe, well, at least they've won 2 national championships in the last 15 years, 3 in the last 20 or 30 or so. They won in the 90s as well. So that's a program that has really high expectations, to say the least. So you've already got 2 losses. I just wonder sometimes in those type of locker rooms if those teams start to check out a little bit. Maybe I'm reaching for something here, but that's just kind of a gut feeling that I have.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I feel like that was my concern as well, of just like, this is a new roster. I've spoken to a couple of players who are like, man, I wish I played more, but haven't yet. But I will also say that on the Wednesday show of Locked On Gators, I had Hayden Hansen on, who's a Florida Gator freshman tight end. He's there every Wednesday. And I don't remember if it was on air or off air, but I remember asking him about it, and he was just like, oh no, like he's like, the veteran leaders in that room are pissed.
Good.
He's like they're pissed about last year's Missouri loss. He's like
I mean, they should be.
they should. Yeah,
Yeah.
Florida should have won that game. Florida wasn't a good team last year,
Right.
but I think they should have won that game. I think they just were. It was horrible execution, horrible coaching, and I love it because Dan Mullen loves it. It got us Billy, but I think Florida should have won that game, and they didn't. And I know that a lot of the veteran leaders are pissed about it, and they're looking forward to this game.
Okay. Well, that makes me hesitate on picking Missouri to win a little bit then.
Good.
But you know what? Can I ask you one sort of fun question that's been on my mind? I am serious about this question, but it'll probably get a chuckle from your listeners a little bit. When does Urban Meyer get on the Florida Ring of Honor? It's got to happen. Come on, quit denying the guy. He's maybe your best coach in school history. What are we doing here? What is that? Did something happen with Urban Meyer? I'm forgetting. I'm being told yes, there was some scandal there. Okay, sorry. But seriously, he's got to get up there at some point, right? It's been 10 years. We can do it. Gary Pinkel just got on the wall at Missouri, and it's only been 6 years or 7 years. Come on, get Urban up there. Give him his props.
I feel like Florida wants to, and then every time that they're like, "Oh, let's do it," he does something stupid, and they're just like they're like, "Oh, he's in the NFL now.
Right?
He's up. He's a little
It's
more
cool.
mature here."
Yeah.
And then
What could possibly go wrong?
and then he screws the pooch immediately. Yeah. They couldn't even do it. Which, by the way,
I was gonna say they got to wait another 4 or 5 years now at least. I think, unfortunately for Urban. Yeah.
See how he screws that one up too. I will say.
And by then, I think you never know. There could be a contingent of people on Gator Reddit that are fully bring back Urban. Like it'll happen. Just wait. Give it another year. If Napier slightly disappoints in year 2, the bring back Urban crowd, it will happen. Just watch. I know college football fans.
I'll tell you this. I have gotten YouTube comments that are Billy Napier needs to bring in Urban Meyer as offensive coordinator because the offensive play calling at certain points has been so bad. But
I'm sure Urban's going to jump at that opportunity. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he'd love to come right back, especially because they're making a Netflix documentary about the Urban Meyer championship teams. So I'm sure that whatever comes out about that will delay the Urban Meyer to Gainesville.
Yeah, there's going to be some revelation if I know Urban Meyer.
Oh yeah, there's going to be something just horrible.
just despicable.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you for making Locked On Gators or Locked On Mizzou your first listen of the day. Make your second listen Locked On SEC, hosted by Chris Gordy. And John, I'm sorry to do this to you, but this is how I wrap up every show. Get the best coverage on the best conference, including the best university, the University of Florida, with Locked On SEC.
That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Mizzou. Of course, we'll talk whatever news breaks on Friday. I'll give you my official pick. Yes, I waffled very, very badly there, but you know what? I'll actually give you a real pick this time, I promise, as I adjust my headphone volume here at the very end. But you know what? Thanks, as always, for joining me. Thanks for telling a friend to go to LockedOnMizzou.com. And until next time, I'm John Miller. And, of course, this has been Locked on Mizzou.